Hi everyone. I am honored on a second time to be talking with author A.S. King, as well as special guest Spock from the planet Vulcan, as well as Kurt Vonnegut from the planet Tralfamador. So welcome everyone. Thank you for being here.
Oh, I wish. Wouldn't that be a great group of people?
That would be so
It,
awesome.
it would be great. And I mean, I will say Jimi Hendrix is there in the background, then you have my Holy Trinity right there.
Oh yeah, I see him
So
now. I see
yeah,
him kind of
yeah.
tucked over there. Yeah.
But I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, and I'm glad to be
Wonderful.
talking with you about this new book that is about to enter the world. We're recording this on September 6th, and the book comes out, I think it's on the 24th in the United States, so just a few
Yeah,
weeks away.
yeah,
And I've had the chance to read it through NetGalley, but the book is Pick the Lock.
it's true. It is pick to lock.
It is, it is.
Sometimes, you know what? After you get used to it, it never gets old, but you also get used to it, and then you sort of, for me anyway, I can't believe it's 2 weeks away. I'm like, oh, I guess I'm releasing a book in 2 weeks. I guess that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, with the world of publishing, is this something I imagine it's been in the pipeline for a while. I know with graphic novels, they sometimes come years after
Oh
they're
yeah.
created.
Yeah.
So probably
This,
nice to see in the world.
yeah, I'd say, well, this, most of my books take a long time to write. And so it's not necessarily the publishing journey. In fact, I'm very, very grateful to Dutton for sometimes speeding things up because well, they won't let me say I'm late. It takes me a while to write. And a young adult novel like this, you know what I mean? Dig would be the same. It's 3.5 years. So I know I started writing this in the beginning of 2021, if I'm
Oh
right.
wow, yeah,
And so I was able to finish it in the beginning of this year. And then we sort of did rush this part.
yeah, yeah. I was going to
Not rush, but
ask.
you know, yeah.
Uh, Speedy process.
Mm-hmm.
Speedy
Mm-hmm.
process, yeah. I was going to
Yeah.
ask about that process of writing for young adults because I work every day with young adults. I'm a high school English teacher and have done stuff at the middle school and college level too. And, all ages represent their challenges, but young adults they're a discerning group. They are an interesting crowd. So curious about what it's like to work and write for that particular group.
I love that you use the word discerning. It's a word I use for my 17-year-old son a lot. Very
Hmm.
discerning young man. And I think that's actually the one thing that adults overlook when it comes to teenagers. I think they overlook a lot. But one of the biggest things is that, a 17-year-old is 1 year from adulthood.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and are they though, depending on what they've been through, how they navigate the world. I know 17-year-olds who are more mature than 57-year-olds I know. And
Hmm.
so, and I mean truly more mature, truly more level, calm, can make decisions in really logical and really I don't know, practical ways. So when I write for young adults, I mean, Pick the Lock is truly a crossover book. This book is as much for adults as it is for young adults. Most of my books for young adults are, especially the more recent ones. And I would say that the reason for that is, well, I mean, there's plenty of adult books that have teen or young characters. I find that interesting. There was a debate at one point, like, what makes it an adult book? What makes it a young adult book? And honestly, now that I've read across, for decades now, nothing is the answer to that one. Nothing. No,
Hmm.
there's really not a huge difference at all. I mean, I have Catcher in the Rye on my desk all the time, and that was an adult book, but was it?
Hmm.
And it was, and that's the thing. And I think what we need to understand is that books give us different things, right? Books can
Yeah.
give us a great story, and this was a great beach read, and it, put me to sleep every night, and I got to read it on the beach or whatever it is, our what we need from a book. But I think that a young adult book, um, can really help adults heal their inner teenagers because
Hmm.
teenagers specifically are blown off. Like inner children is one thing, inner teenagers is another, because I think we're often, because of the myth of growing up, we're often at odds with our inner teenager already.
Yeah.
The the minute that we hit our 20s, we're like, oh, I was such an idiot. Don't do that. You weren't an idiot. You were just 15 and you didn't understand stuff yet. It's very simple,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
So for me, writing for young adults, there's absolutely no difference. I've been writing a lot of adult work lately, and there's not a huge difference. The biggest Obviously, the biggest difference is the protagonist making sure that they're a teen, which
Yeah.
is funny because the short stories we read in school, I mean, there were no teens in Walter Mitty. There's no teens in Hills Like White Elephants. There's no, notice I'm just listing all the dead white guys. There's, even I mean, there are teens in A and P, but I don't know if we want to talk about that part, so it's like,
Right.
mm. But for me, I think the biggest thing I want to do is never talk down. Never, ever, ever, ever dumbed anything down. There's no reason to dumb anything down. Teenagers live through adult experiences if they live with adults, period. And
Hmm.
they see them, they're actually far more discerning about those experiences than the adults in the house are, I think.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of a moment to reconsider when I'm teaching a story or teaching a book, and we're discussing it, talking about it, and I have a student in class that pulls out an observation that I didn't have, even if it's like the third or fourth time I've read the book, and they pull something out, and I'm going, "Oh yeah, do I pretend I just kind of knew that because I'm the teacher man person?" Or do I go, wow, you noticed something that I didn't notice and pulled out a completely different avenue there.
They do that with me. I have
Yeah.
teenagers years later. I had this happen with Vera Dietz years after Please Ignore Vera Dietz came out. I had a student say, "Did you name Overlook Road because it's the same as ignoring, and ignoring and overlooking is, like," and I was like, no, I didn't. But wow, thanks for pointing that out, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of that. It happens that way. I mean, I just reread two of my older books this summer because they're going to re-release in October. I Crawl Through It and Reality Boy. And it was amazing what I found in those books that I didn't realize I had in those books. It's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. My
Yeah.
therapist years ago said to me, "Have you ever read your books?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "I think you should." And and so I guess that was the beginning of it this summer. But yeah, but the same went for those, even though they were older books and they were back when I was kind of pushing out a book a year to support the family and get my ex-husband through college. Um, that was it was amazing because I didn't remember those. I mean, they're just like they're flash, but it turns out I didn't dumb any of those down either. I can't do that. Why would I? Why would
Yeah.
I condescend to teenagers? I find that they're smarter than a lot of adults because a lot of adults are masking,
Yeah. True
or
enough.
the
True
adult,
enough.
yeah, like the adult thing is a mask, I think, in itself.
And you mentioned rereading your own work. It's always so interesting to me to read a young adult protagonist, a teenage protagonist, because I remember reading Catcher in the Rye when I was 16 or 17 years old and thinking, man, this guy gets it. And of course, now I teach that book from time to time. And so looking back, there's a little bit of me that's like, he still gets it. And then there's also a part of me that's like, what would I do to like be in his life? How would I be in his life? Which at the same time as how would I be in my own life when I was
Right.
16, 17 years old?
True. I mean, they're all phonies.
That's right. That's right. That's what Holden says. I believe it if Holden says
It's,
it.
it's true.
Or should I believe it if Holden says it? That's
I
a whole
don't
other
know.
interesting question.
That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. Now
And
there is a Jane in Catcher in the Rye, but we also have a different Jane in Pick the Lock. So what were
mm,
see that pivot there?
all that, yeah,
Thank you.
I'm
What were
impressed.
the ingredients, thanks, like for that character?
Oh, Jane. Well, the book started as a drawing on a post-it note. I might even have it here. I think I do. It was basically a hamster tube with two 45-degree bends in it, and then a dinner chair. There it is. A dinner chair in
Mm,
on the flat side right there. And it just said system. And I knew what it meant. What it meant was that the person inside the system was unaware of the types of things that were going on outside of the system. And I knew that it was going to be, like a way of shuttling women around. Jane came to me as very organically. She wanted to talk and she wanted to tell me about this system. But the problem was she kept coming out in like a Jane Eyre voice. It was very Victorian. I was like, what the heck is this? This doesn't sound like me.
hmm.
And so I probably have maybe, oh, I don't know, 6 or 7 attempts at trying to start the book. Um, just sitting here doing the work. And none of them really worked until one day and that's the thing about how I write. I got furious about something. I got furious about something that somebody said about God knows something. And it was a real throwaway thing too. It was a real kind of throwaway comment. And so then came the prologue. And she is
Mhm.
angry. And, she has just found these security tapes and she's been looking through them and she's just realizing she's been lied to her whole life, that everything she believed was true is a lie. Or at least, I mean, it doesn't matter that it's everything or not. That's very black and white. But when you realize that most of the things you were taught were lies, then it may as well be everything. You have to doubt everything at that point. It's hard because it's really shaky ground.
Mhm.
Um, and so she came from, well, as I wrote over the last 3 years, she came a little bit from me because I have been learning things that I didn't know, that I thought were true that turned out to be lies. But also most importantly, watching my kids, and my teenager experience the exact same thing, and then I'm watching what that did to him, like as he slowly realized the truth of things,
Mhm.
how he handled that. Again, far more discerning than I am. So it was kind
Yeah.
of impressive how he's handling it, but also he's a young person, and I think that will take a while to process.
Yeah.
He'll process that over and over again in his life, the way we all do. But Jane just sort of showed up. And the Victorian angle, I was like, what is happening? And then it turned out that once I invented the system and I figured out where it went, of course, it's a Victorian house. It's just down the road here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And, it's in my mind. It's not really down there, but I'm sure I could find one that's similar. But yeah, so Jane just came as someone who was angry and stuck and trying to figure out what the heck was going on in this weird carnival type life that
Mhm.
she
Mhm.
realizes now that she was in. Before she already knew that it was high drama and high, mm, what I call that, high drama and very negative and backbiting and all that, but that was normalized for her. So because it was normalized for her, when she realizes that there are other people, right, other adults there that aren't like that, she's like, wait a second. And once she learns the truth, then she can understand, like, kind of what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. I want to follow up on that terrible freedom of uh being who you want to be and making those choices. But I also want to point back again to our friend Kurt back there, who is so nicely dressed over there. You were talking
Yes.
about starting this book 6 or 7 times, and I think that's so important for uh people that enjoy writing, people that want to write to hear, because I think Kurt Vonnegut started Slaughterhouse-Five like 30 times on a typewriter, something like that,
Yeah.
which means he literally had to go back and like start over. It wasn't
Yeah.
a computer doc or anything like that. So just want to shout out that aspect of your process and commitment there as well.
Yeah. I mean, I will say with this book, it's 90,000 words, so 400 pages. So it's kind of long for compared to my last one, but not long compared to the Dig, but like, um, easily there's probably 50 to 70,000 words on the cutting room floor that had to be
Mm,
replaced. It was organic. Like suddenly, you know how I write. I mean, I write like a surrealist. So I have my own process. I don't know what I'm doing every day. Um, but it ends up being a wonderful surprise at the end. You're like, oh, look, there's a song here because it's part punk opera. And there
mhm.
was this punk rock song at the end. And I was like, wait, like that's it. That's the whole point of the book. So I was like, oh, great, that'll be the last song. Oh, I guess I'll call it Pick the Lock. And that's how I got the title for the book too, which was really cool. But I didn't even remember writing that song. Jason, what I do is I basically put what I think is like, oof, I think I'll keep this, but it might be garbage. And I throw it all at the end of this big file. And
Mhm.
then one day I go through the big file and I find that and I'm like, what? This is awesome. I guess that's what I'm aiming toward. And I also got a title out of it too. So you can't beat that. But who knows when I wrote that? And it's not like it's funny because I say that sometimes to people and they're like, oh, like, is it a whole like write drunk, edit sober thing? I'm like, no, man, I'm completely sober. I don't do any of that when I write, like nothing except tea. And it's decaf tea. I don't even do caffeine when I write.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty organic in that way. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that metaphor of like picking a lock in a lock is so interesting to think about in different ways. Talking about someone who is trying to relate to their mother, someone who is trying to figure out what's true and what's not, and that moment where something unlocks for you in life. That's definitely something that I took away, and I'm still thinking about from reading the book.
Great, good. Because I mean, there's that real obvious look. Jane's mother is locked in this system, but in
Hmm.
actual fact, most women are locked in that system. We live in a patriarchy. That's how it works. We are locked in a specific system. This is the term glass ceiling wouldn't exist without this.
Hmm.
But technically, useful women, specifically accomplished women, are often really at a it's weird. People will take away from them the things that they believe define women. So family. Suddenly, if you're an accomplished woman and you're successful in your job, well, then you must be a terrible mother. You must be a terrible
Hmm.
wife. And none of that's true. You can be a fantastic mother and wife and still be an accomplished person, but it does require the support of your spouse and your family too. So if there's someone working against you, and in this case, the book, really does show very real-time counter-parenting, a term I've only just learned. I understood parental alienation inside of an intact marriage when I was writing this, but counter-parenting is a really interesting term and more popular, more prevalent than we think. And it really hurts children. Like it absolutely destroys young people because they finding their identity is more difficult.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, well, and you're talking about the experiences of women as a male. I've never felt the requirement to choose family or success. It's
Of
sort
course.
of all been part of the package. That's just sort of what's expected. But to think of it in that binary, you can have the lady or the tiger, you can do this or that,
That's
uh,
right.
sort of approach is very much patriarchy for sure.
It's very real. I used to be waiting on the porch with my suitcase for the, car to pick me up for wherever tour, whatever thing I was doing. And I'd be going away for maybe a day or two. And my neighbors would be like, "Oh, are you leaving again? Those poor children." And I'd
Hmm.
be like,
Hmm.
"Wait a second. Do you think that?" Now, at the same time, I didn't know what was going on, right, in the reality, right? I thought that everything was cool here, and I was in uh, a situation where my kids were safe
Hmm.
from, I thought we were co-parenting. I thought this was the way it was, but that is not how it was. And so this book is a bit of a mirror and a bit of which most of my books are in some spots. It's like it's super surreal. So don't read too much into it. There's no
Yeah.
tubes in my house. But I think all women have those metaphorical tubes in their house. We are controlled by certain things, even if the men in our house aren't doing it. The men outside, the voice in our head, the men in our head, that
Hmm.
sometimes are women. Sometimes they're our mothers. Sometimes, you know what I mean? Sometimes it's just the patriarchy, and it is big. It is big.
Yeah. Yeah. Media voices, entertainment voices, all of those things for
Every
decades. Yeah.
our whole lives. And but yeah, so Pick the Lock was really important for me to write. Like the minute I drew that little tube, I thought, well, what is it about? Like, what is this really about?
Hmm.
And I thought, well, this being in that tube is representative. It's a metaphor for not being able to control your own narrative, not your life, just your narrative. So you think you're doing all these things and you're, doing all this stuff, supporting Mina is the name of the mom. Mina is supporting the family. She's, being really epic, social justice kind of warrior. So is
Hmm.
the whole band. She's a punk band, she's the head of a punk band. And she thinks that she's doing all these great things, and she just thinks that this is an unfortunate side effect of living with this man.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it turns out that what she doesn't know is far bigger, and there's far more unfortunate side effects that she isn't aware of because she's taken him at face value. Um, and then she finds out and destroys the whole thing. But that's not a spoiler. We all knew that was coming.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if I am a young reader out there, any particular questions that you hope I would be asking or thinking about as I explore the book?
I suppose I would want young people to, and I don't want to go gender binary on this, but at the same
Hmm.
time, I would
Hmm.
hope that young men would have a good look at the reality of the patriarchy and the reality of what it really means, not being contrary about, well, I have it bad too, and I can't, no, I just saw a thing on Threads this morning. It was a guy talking about how he can't get dates and he deserves dates. And it's just like, where did you get that idea? And then we know where he
Right.
got it, the patriarchy. That's where he got it. He got
Hmm.
that idea from the patriarchy. And now he's all real sad and kind of pretty much an incel because he was told that he deserved women or a woman.
Hmm.
And he doesn't understand that he wants dates, whereas women are want to be alive at the end of the date. I
Right.
say this as a person who has dated. Um, you know, he's like, everybody on social, on the dating apps, they're this, they're that, they want all these things. And I'm like, we just want to not die or get hurt when
Right.
we meet you. And I don't know what your name is, on Bumble, but I hope I don't meet up with you.
Right.
It's funny, it's sort of interesting that it's not real obvious yet to young men that it's very dangerous to be a young woman. 33% of young women, teenage girls experience dating violence, more than 33% experience dating violence. And I think that is something because we don't talk about domestic violence openly. I
Hmm.
think it's time to start talking about it openly and really, one of the bonuses of social media, TikTok, is that those things are out there, which is, I think, really great.
Hmm.
But does that mean that women or vulnerable people, let's just say, are not going to fall into those same traps? No, it doesn't. It means, we have to be aware of the fact that our childhoods affect how we pick who we love when we're older and things like this. And that's some of the stuff I want to talk about when I go to schools. I'm doing a tour in 3 weeks. And one of the things I would like to talk about is just sort of like, look, this is how it works. This is how the cycle keeps going.
Hmm.
But also to explain that, it's really hard to walk away from somebody you love more than anything in the whole world. But if that person is hurting you and hurting your family, you have to do it. It's so hard. It's the hardest thing in the world because you still love them very much,
Hmm.
but it's it's just it's not worth it. It's not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
You anticipated my next question because I was going to ask about touring and things like that, and the questions that you're exploring next in your work.
I'm really glad you asked this. And for one reason or another, we're a little behind on that sort of stuff. But I think what I have to invent something that really talks about, when I usually go into schools, I when I go into schools, I usually talk about um well, I don't ever say the word trauma. I talk about past experiences. I talk about my past experiences. I talk about how they affected me.
Hmm.
Um and this time I'm gonna lean a little heavier into relationships and what healthy relationships look like. There's an organization here in Pennsylvania called the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence. I've done a little bit of work with them, and they were very helpful to me in my life. And I would like to be able to take some of their bullet points along with me and be able to talk to young people about, look, man, this isn't a good sign, and this
Hmm.
isn't a good sign, but also people grow, right? So
Hmm. Hmm.
there's that kind of thing. Um, but there's a lot of really shocking data coming out about what young people are facing when it comes to relationships right now. There was a Wall Street Journal piece, I think it was recently, might have been New York Times, now I can't remember. Because I canceled my subscription to both. Um, but it was talking about just some of the trends in specifically what young women are having to deal with when it comes to relationships in teen years. And it was honestly, it was stomach churning. I couldn't really get down with that. The internet
Yeah.
is a wonderful, beautiful thing, but it has also given us, um, honestly, it's given us something that we can talk about, but we're choosing not to.
Hmm. Hmm.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So we
Yeah.
go back to this. So it's luckily there's those things on the internet for young people to see when it comes to domestic violence and dating violence. But then I guess I'll also be talking about one of the things I had an event last year with some librarians in at Kutztown University, and they were also young people. It was a really interesting crowd because it was librarians, librarian students, and then also students. So I was like, "Ooh, this is a wide crew." But one of the things somebody asked me, one of the young people asked me, was, "What did you wish? What would you wish that you knew when you were our age that you know now that you didn't know then?"
Hmm.
And I said, "Okay, this is going to come off heavy, but I'm going to be straight with you. There are people in the world who are really terrible, and they will absolutely hurt you, and they will take your biggest vulnerability, and they will take your biggest pain, and they will use it against you, and they will tell everybody about it, and they'll lie, and they'll twist the stories, and they'll make you into and it will drive you over the edge. And I want you to know those people are there, and oftentimes they call themselves your brothers or your lovers or your best friends, and you have to be careful around people. If they give you even an inkling of a red flag, be careful around those people."
Hmm.
And so, that leads well into Brutus, the rat in the book.
Hmm.
But it's, I really think it's an important thing to tell young people. And I'll tell you why, because I had the disease of giving everybody the benefit of the doubt all the time. And I
Yeah.
still have it. It's terrible. Like, that's why I don't date, because my friends were like, "Girl, just don't. You need to change." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." Because I just think, well, that's just a quirky little thing that person has. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's still the same old stuff. And
Hmm.
it's just, I waited too long. I trust way too much. I believed so many lies, and I didn't know they were lies. So of course I don't beat myself up too much about it.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
it's important, I think, that young people understand that they do have to have that toughness, that they're being taught, well, everybody has good intentions. No, actually, no, they don't. Not everybody has good intentions. And I hate to say it to young people. I don't want to break them, but I want to
Yeah.
prepare them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people are, as you say, essentially selfish. And if you're in the way of
Yes.
whatever they're after, yeah.
And they'll do whatever they can to get that. And then there's also like the envy, there's jealousy,
Hmm.
there's so many things that really affect people in such a deep way that they honestly will do really messed up things for no reason other than to win a game that you're not playing.
Yeah.
It's, and that's sort of one of the most confounding things for me in my life, because I've wandered or stumbled through this life kind of going, wait, what just happened to me? And now that I can look at it from a perspective from my mid-50s and go, oh, those all pretty much connect. That was just
Mhm.
you trusting people that weren't trustworthy. And that was you giving everyone the benefit of the doubt because you want them to, you think everyone means what they say and says what they mean, just like you. In fact, that is not true.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to talk about that a good bit
Yeah.
as well. It's young people. I mean, again, it's teenagers. They already know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to be reminded and good to hear that from someone who's been through, which I think is a lot of what your books and great literature do, um, affirming those experiences and observations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. You're talking about the things that are online that people don't talk about, or if they do talk about them, it's made into a joke, or
Yeah.
because they're very uncomfortable. So just
Yes.
circling back to that for a moment and sending some uh, support there for that statement of having difficult, uncomfortable conversations that are in fact healthy.
Very. And that's what, me, my work. So it's like, that's why I write books. I mean, I want to have those conversations. I want to have, this is not my first book that centers domestic violence, and, the types of, um, situations that arise when there's a very unbalanced power situation in a family, even if it looks one way and the other way, it doesn't
Hmm.
matter. The idea is what it looks like. Well, that's half the problem with domestic violence. Everybody thinks, well, they look so happy.
Hmm.
And that's
Hmm.
that's the whole trick. There's a lot of people that out there that aren't having as great of a time as they look like they're having, and that's just how it goes. But Yeah, I think it's important to have these conversations, and I think it's important to talk about the danger of it. Actually, somebody in one of the interview questions I was answering the other day kind of talked about what can young people do if they suspect, abuse, and like this domestic violence, and it was a really strange question for me because I'm like, first of all, this is dangerous. I don't
Hmm.
know if you understand that this is dangerous. And I think a lot of people are like restraining orders or protection from abuse orders. They just kind of throw that out. Like they don't understand that there are people that are absolutely in grave danger of
Hmm.
being murdered. Um,
Hmm.
and how many women are murdered a day in this country by their partners? And they don't understand that, you know, eh, sometimes they're not empty threats, and any threat should be taken seriously. And things like this, because we are so busy kind of going, it's uncomfortable. I don't really want to talk about that. He didn't really mean it. And that's the thing. That's the thing about the rat, right? That's the thing about that thing I want to talk about. The people go, well, that person didn't really mean it. Really? Did they say it more than once? Then they meant it. And it's that
Hmm. Hmm.
simple. And you don't want to be going, he didn't really mean it for 29 years of your life, because suddenly you'll be 51 years old and things will be real different.
Yeah.
And just to be able to kind of, and here's the other thing. What does the world tell us from the very beginning? You can't get divorced. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't do these things. And it's like, look, there are reasons that to do these things. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And
Hmm.
and your safety and your happiness and your children's happiness and safety are very, very important. The problem in many of these cases is that a lot of that stuff is covert, so you don't know. And then once you know, you can only do what you can do. So, so yeah, I hope to have those conversations in, really, how do I put this? Really relevant, safe, comfortable, and healthy ways. That's just like, because it's common sense.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's common sense. Little kids know. Don't
Yeah.
punch that guy. Don't be mean to that person. And it's that simple. But then once we get into the dynamics, the next middle grade book I'm writing next year is I can't wait. It's up there on the wall. But it's a prequel to Marvin Gardens, Me and Marvin Gardens, but it's specifically about one of my favorite people from my childhood, and me. And so it's kind of the adventures of Obi's mom and her BFF back in 1980. And of course, there's toxic waste, and shouldn't there always be? But one of the interesting parts about it is I always wanted to talk about the phenomenon in fifth grade. Now I don't, it changed now. I think it's a different age, but in 1980 or around there,
Hmm.
you could play kickball every day at recess, and they'd pick teams. And I was like Bert Hold from Munchausen, right? I had an
Hmm.
incredible leg. I was a great kickball player. And then in fifth grade, suddenly, if a boy picked you for his team, it was curtains for him, man. It was curtains. They were just like, they would get on him about it. They're like, oh, you
Hmm.
like her, the whole thing. And
Hmm.
eventually,
Hmm.
even the best kickball player wouldn't get picked for the team. And that's patriarchy again, right?
Yeah.
But it's in a weird, playful space that's not. It's actually really unhealthy for those poor guys because why are they doing that? Like, that's silly. And the bonus of that friend of mine, is that he was never like that. He always was. We could sit in his tent and listen to the Phillies on the transistor radio and eat popcorn and just like, just goof around, and people talked. He didn't care. And that was one of the coolest
Awesome.
things about him. And he's still actually one of the best men I've ever met in my whole life. He's an example for epic men. So I can't wait to write about that, especially for middle graders, and just show them kind of what Joel was like, because what a guy, and what he's still like.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Love that. Love a good male archetype in literature too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good. It's good because I mean, I'm a little tired of writing about men that are mean. It's getting a little old, and it's about time to concentrate on some of these incredible men that I know, and who have been close to me and friends for a long time, and just, yeah, and
Yeah.
model it, in a way. It's funny. I like to be able to say that sometimes some of the best role models for me were people who were doing things I would never in my life do. And I'd be like, oh, I will never be like that person. And we're blessed with some of those. Sometimes we're born into families with people like that. Sometimes we're just blessed because we're always going to meet people that do stuff that, that we would never do. But for me, that's really powerful. But watching somebody that you can admire and that shows other guys, right? Like I actually
Mhm.
just thought of that scene again because I haven't written it yet. So I've just thought, ooh, that scene could go this way. And I'm about to write it down on a post-it note and stick it up up on that wall. But
Yeah,
just to be able to show other young men, you don't have to be like that. You can actually be really cool. So that's
yeah,
cool. As for Pick the Lock, I think there's more bad examples, in a way, but I also love how Jane writes the opera to be able to express herself and kind of get away from that toxicity in her own way, and fight it the same way her mother's fighting it, which of course is a little stab at her dad's back, I think.
yeah. So you're talking about some of the bad examples of the patriarchy in Pick the
Yeah.
Lock.
Yes. Right. So you given me an opportunity, right, to talk about this. Okay. So, I mean, all in all, I think when it comes to Pick the Lock, it's going to take me a little minute to figure out in a way what it's about. I read it 2 weeks ago and I was like, ooh, that's a good book. Like I know I wrote it, but I don't, I'm so, I'm too close to it sometimes. But some of the things I really think that I want to talk about when it comes to this book is finding your own voice, following the dream that you want, no matter how many people, tell you not to or tell you that it's rubbish. That's how I got here. It took me a long time to get published, and there's plenty of people who told me a lot of discouraging things before I got here. And then yeah, I'm just gonna say it's a weird one. Pick it up. It's part punk opera, part prose. Some parts are written from a rat's point of view. And I'm going to be touring. I'll be in Philly area. I'll be in Baltimore. I'll be in Chicago and St. Paul. Um, my launch party officially, if you're in Pennsylvania or anywhere near Lancaster County, um, it's on the 22nd of September, and you can find the details on my website. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to be doing a lot of stuff. It's going to be a little longer tour season than I think I had in mind, but it'll also be really cool. Um, yeah, thank you for having me, Jason. I appreciate you.
Of course, and wishing you safe travels on the tour, many wonderful conversations with readers, and I'll be sure and link the website and the video and audio so that listeners can go and check it out.
Cool. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks so much. Glad to have you back anytime.